Omar is one of two female Muslim lawmakers, and some Jewish lawmakers have called that offensive to suggest that they have an allegiance to both the U.S. and Israel. Many of them wanted a strong condemnation of Omar, saying her comments have no place in the Congress. Others supported her, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But in an attempt to hold her party together, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi took all the teeth out of the resolution. Wyoming Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney was furious about it, saying in a statement, quote, "Today's resolution vote was a sham put forward by Democrats to avoid condemning one of their own and denouncing vile anti-Semitism." Rep. Omar's comments were wrong, and she has proven multiple times that she embodies a vile, hate-filled, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel bigotry. So why didn't Democrats have the stones to call Omar's comments for what they are, anti-Semitic? With me now, co-host of The Five on the Fox News Channel, it is Juan Williams.
Hi.
Juan, I know you love love. I know you hate hatred.
Sure.
I don't think it would have been the worst thing in the world for Democrats to focus in on anti-Semitism here and really condemn it forcefully.
Well, if we're talking politics, it was clearly an effort by, I think, the Christian evangelical right, but on a larger scale, the GOP, to divide the Democrats on just this point.
What about the Jewish Democrats who were offended by what she said and wanted her named in the resolution?
I think there were some, because I think that Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota, she used tropes that are offensive in terms of not only that, the business about divided loyalties, but Benjamins and the like. Clearly,
and hypnotizing
yeah,
Jews.
Clearly, these are historical themes that have been used to diminish and demean Jews globally, not just in this country. And she did not display any sensitivity. But on the other hand, and I think you hear this from people like Bernie Sanders, who's Jewish, the senator from Vermont, he said, you know, what you're seeing here is an effort by the Republicans to undercut the Democrats and undercut any legitimate criticism of Israel as opposed to anti-Semitism. Elizabeth Warren said the same thing. This is chilling in terms of free speech in this country. So you get Pelosi saying, I'm going to hold my forces together. What you just saw there, and I'm so glad you played that or displayed that statement from Lynn Cheney. Lynn Cheney said, this is shameful because the Democrats held together. The votes that were against that resolution, Kennedy, came from Republicans, those 23 votes.
Yes, that's absolutely right, because they have seen how Democrats are trying to use race and racism as a wedge tool in order to make the president look worse and make the Democratic field look better. It's all politics. It's not one side doing it more than the other, and it's also no surprise that the other side is going to exploit any weakness or fracture within the caucus. But let's take ourselves outside of politics for a second. Anti-Semitism is on the rise.
No question.
It is very serious, and it is in our very recent past the Holocaust. And, I don't think Jim Clyburn does himself any favors by saying what Ilhan Omar has been through is much more personal than some of these Jewish members of Congress.
I didn't understand that at all.
Yeah, and I take offense to that, because that's like saying slavery was 200 years ago. You don't know real racism. You don't know what real pain is. And there's something about that you can't categorize every person's personal connection to their family history.
Well, I'm not sure what you were saying at that last one, but on the Jim Clyburn part, I agreed with you, because I think that what Clyburn was suggesting, that because Ilhan Omar was born in Somalia, had gone through a lot of the anti-Muslim purge and all the rest before she came to this country, that a lot of this was very immediate for her, and that her reaction to the situation in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians is to somewhat stand up and say, hey, these people are, in fact, being pushed out. There's no longer talk of a two-state solution, which has been long-standing U.S. policy.
Yeah.
And you have a very right-wing Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, policy being put forth. So I think that he was trying to say, you have to understand where she's coming from, and she may not be familiar with all the kind of limits we put on conversation.
I don't know about that, because she's been pretty vocal in her home state of Minnesota, and she's had a lot of members of the Jewish faith kind of pull her aside and say, listen, this is offensive, and this is why. So it's not her first time, but my question is now, if she says something or does something again, I would be really shocked if these Democratic senators who are running for president rush to her defense and paint her statements with all sorts of nuance, like she was really talking about foreign policy in terms of Israel. No, she wasn't. And we know that. And even Nancy Pelosi said, well, she's really not that smart.
No, I don't think she says not that smart. She says she's not familiar exactly with kind of the road, the map in terms of how we discuss foreign policy and Israel in this country to avoid charges of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
But I think the key here is this. If you look at the vote...
Don't use phrases like, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. When
well,
you're
of course, those
about...
are offensive.
Yeah.
We agree. But I'm just saying, if you look at this, I think the reason the Republicans want to divide the Democrats on this issue is because Jewish voters, I think 6% of Jewish voters say they'll vote for President Trump. But 50% of Jewish voters agree with his policies, like moving the capital to Jerusalem.
Yes.
Trying to undo the Iran deal.
So if I were a Jewish Democrat, I would be looking at this resolution saying to myself, why am I still a registered Democrat?
Well, I think your point is exactly the point that Republicans want to drive home tonight.
Yes, and I think that does speak to the politicization.
That's the politicization of what's going on. But I don't think, and I don't think Pelosi said this, do I think Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite? No. Do I think that she's a babe in the woods in this discussion, trying to say we need to have honest discussion about our policy in Israel? Yes.
There may be some competency issues. She may be emotionally immature, but it can't happen again.
It shouldn't happen again. And if it happens again, then, you know, I think the Republicans will be successful in hammering the Democrats for not specifically saying this is about Ilhan Omar and about anti-Semitism.
If it's about foreign policy, then go do your homework so you sound well-informed.
Well,
and then you won't have claims that you don't know.
Well, this is the first time we have Muslims, two Muslim women in the Congress. And a lot of this, by the way, seems to me be about the freshman class with all those young women, and especially women of color.
Competing for oxygen.
Well, but I think pushing the discussion, especially in the Congress, into areas we've never had before, because we didn't have a Muslim voice in the Congress saying, hey, we have a different view on Israel and their relationships.
Views. I think that's great, but I also love rationality.
You know what? Also, I like people who aren't offensive.
Yeah, I like people who aren't offended. Juan Williams, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Karen.
Always great.